It was, it's not ready yet. Okay, we're all set. Good evening. With the hour being 6:53 p.m., we'd like to call to order the Committee of the Whole meeting of Monday, July 25th, 2022. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks? Trustee Conroy?
Here.
Trustee Leclerc?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
Trustee.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Trustee Ketchmark as President Pro Temp in the absence of President Garvey.
Second. Motion by Trustee Cote, second by Trustee Leclerc. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Conroy?
Aye.
Trustee Leclerc?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is to discuss the recommendation to approve Williams Architects contract proposal for the community center feasibility study. Stevie?
Good evening, Board. Before introducing the representative from Williams Architect, Andy Dogan, who's here with us today to provide a brief overview presentation of their project proposal for the feasibility study, I'd like to provide a brief background on this committee item memo so that we can see what brings us here today with this feasibility study. The village basement site is our only owned indoor large-use multi-purpose recreation space. It's roughly 1,200 square feet, with the entire department being an estimated 3,500 square feet. This is where we house many indoor recreation programs, events, as well as lease space to our CSPAR Adult Special Needs Eagles program. The village basement, as I had mentioned, is our only large-use indoor space. The department provides a variety of programming on-site, and additionally, we're able to provide programming to the community through our intergovernmental agreements with several of our school districts located within village boundaries. We have IGAs with Brookfield-LaGrange Park School District 95, Lyons School District 103, Riverside Brookfield High School District 208, and Riverside School District 96. We provide youth and adult sports programs, 3v3 basketball leagues, a summer camp programming at the District 95 Gross Middle School, before and after school programming at all 5 elementary schools within District 103, teen camp programming Monday through Friday for 10 weeks in the summer, and pool usage on Fridays for all summer camps at Riverside Brookfield High School, District 208, and enrichment camp and early childhood programming at District 96 Hollywood Elementary during the summer months. Facilitating programming within these intergovernmental locations requires an abundance of communication, coordination, usage confirmations, and follow-up and adherence to facility expectations. Utilization of these satellite facilities through intergovernmental agreements requires more office administration, staff training, logistics and coordination, versus overseeing programs that can be held directly here on site at the Village Hall. Village programming within these intergovernmental locations does not take priority over their own school programming and activities. So oftentimes we are second, third, or further in the list to try to access programming, and in the case of conflicts, we oftentimes may have to cancel or re-coordinate our timing of program offerings. The Village of Brookfield, being one of the largest communities in the area, is the only community among our surrounding cities and villages that does not provide a dedicated community space to our residents. Here at the Recreation Department, we have done the best we can to grow programming. Within your committee item memo, there is a table that outlines the revenue growth And the important piece of that is the revenue growth is a direct result of the program growth, which is a direct result of community need and requests in service. The department is also where we house our youth programs in winter and summer months, and there's a permanently leased space, as I said, with the C-SPAR Eagles Adult Needs Program. We are currently at the maximum use within the facility for these programs during the summer months. We have resulted to purchasing rental space within District 95's middle school to access their facility during the summer months, which is not a part of our original IGA, so that we could open up a wait list for camps to accommodate an additional 70 families. So we work out of there during the summer, as well as here, we're at our maximum in families that we can serve. The significant growth we've had over the years is really contributed to the community need. I should say a result of the community need. And as I had mentioned, the financial growth is a direct result of increased programs. We're operating at our maximum abilities, and as a result of utilization to our maximum within our current Village Hall municipal space, we did bring an item to the village board at our village workshop for budget year 2022. Within that item request was a $70,000 request for feasibility study to explore the options in community center. As a result, the board did support keeping that item within that budget so that we can take a look at what our options are and exploration of feasibility to answer all of the questions that come along with the potential and the impacts that something like that project would hold. The community center feasibility study would include a robust, comprehensive look into village services and provide a multifaceted approach to questions surrounding the feasibility of a community center. The project called for proposals that would include services of a consulting firm to provide its proposals on conducting a feasibility for a community center that would provide affordable opportunities for an intergenerational, multifunctional facility. It would explore the feasibility in operating a space that would provide Brookfield residents and organizations access to a recreational community space either as a newly built space, leased or purchased, or rehabilitation of existing municipal space. The consultant scope of work for this project requested at minimum tasks and outcomes, including demographics analysis, market analysis, conceptual development, and financial analysis. As I said, Andy Dogan, the representative from Williams Architect, is here. He can speak to the details of their project proposal as it relates to all of those scopes of work requests within those proposals. The board supporting this item within the 22 budget year allowed us to seek requests for proposals. So the village put that out this spring. As a result of that RFP and feasibility study services, 6 different firms provided their submittals. The village staff team reviewing all submissions included internal staff, village manager, assistant manager, economic development director, and myself. Submissions were reviewed with the guidance of a scoring matrix, evaluating the primary pieces of each of those proposal submittals. While the scoring matrix was used to assist in determination by each individual staff, all staff met to review submissions in person with additional comments, concerns, and notes shared for each submittal. After review of all submissions, staff recommended moving forward with 3 finalists to an in-person interview panel. As part of the second phase, we had an additional invitees to that panel. It included a board trustee representative, Jennifer Hendricks, and a Parks and Recreation Commissioner, Commissioner Kyle Whitehead. 3 in-person presentations from the final 3 submittals were conducted, and the panel took time to interview each respective organization during this process. As a result of that phase 2 process of in-person presentation and interviews, there was a consensus among the panel in which firms stood out to be best aligned with village expectation and good fit to our community in conducting this feasibility study. Williams Architects provided a presentation and interview that thoroughly presented their approach to this important study taking care to adapt their services unique to the village needs and expectations. Meeting with the village in person were Williams Architects partner and project point of contact, Andy Dogan, who again is here to present on their proposal. Williams Architects is recommended for several reasons by village staff. They have a long-standing relationship with their subcontractors. The other proposals that we did interview and see project proposals from either had newly established subcontractor relationships, or they would be working for the first time on this project. Williams has over 20 years partnership and working relationships with both Pros Consulting and Hitchcock Design Group as well. Hitchcock Design Group is reliable. We have used them for several projects, including large capital projects like the redevelopment of Candy Cane Park, and they did assist in our open space study for the parks as well. In addition to a long-standing, proven, successful team, Williams Architects employs a multilingual staff who are able to join the project to ensure equity in this feasibility study through being able to provide more efficient communication with our diverse community. According to our last census, we have 23% families identifying as Latin, with nearly 20% Spanish-speaking within the community. So that piece of equity and wanting to include as many residents in this process as possible during that outreach phase and collecting data and analysis was an outlier for Williams. They really hit on that point and being able to support those diverse equity needs within the community. Other submittals provided scope of work and engagement process in the community. Williams provided solid examples that went above and beyond minimum requests. And for example, in the latest project study with Arlington Heights, they engaged that community in over 20 different events administered through multiple community groups and not just the project that they were assigned. This was more than 3 to 4 outlined by other submittals and showed the dedication on this part of the process. Williams emphasized their approach as engaging mind, body, and spirit, which aligns with the Brookfield community and our civic dedication to the feel and connectedness in community that is shared by so many residents. Williams conveyed in their proposal and interview presentation that the technical pieces of the study will provide in data collection. It'll be a smoothly conducted process, which again is supported by their 20 years partnership with Pros Consulting. A final highlight from the interview presentations process not offered by other submittals was the emphasis on financial sustainability and their final recommendations in community center feasibility. Not only did Williams provide their approach and data collection to include the financial realities of exploring all facility options, but they went a step further in committing to finding active partners in funding such a recommendation. Their services do not end at recommendation and data collection, but are committed to a partnership that supports a realistic planning outlook as well. The Parks and Recreation Commission was provided the Williams Architects proposal for review and discussion at their July 19th commission meeting. 6 of the 7 members were present for discussion, and there was a consensus and support from all 6 commissioners in moving forward with staff recommendation of Williams Architects. A letter of support is included in the attachments of this memo as well by Commissioner Kyle Whitehead. Staff is recommending the village moves forward with Williams Architect to provide a Village of Brookfield Community Center feasibility study. Williams Architects provided a clear, robust submittal. Their proposal included an estimated total cost of $88,290, and this is $18,000 over the original budgeted amount. Williams Architects' full proposal is included within the attachments, and I would like to invite Andy Dogan from Williams Architects to come up and provide his more detailed proposal pieces of that study. Right behind me, okay.
Great, thank you, Stevie, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me tonight. As Stevie introduced, my name is Andy Dogan. I'm one of the senior principals at Williams Architects, and we really appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit more about our firm and about our proposal for a community center feasibility study for the Village of Brookfield. A little bit more about myself. In addition to being a principal and project manager on these types of feasibility efforts within our firm, I'm also a resident of Elgin, and I've been on our Parks and Recreation Committee for the last 8 years. This will be my last term coming up in about a year or so, but it's important. I say that because it's important for me as I manage a process like this to not only think about this through the lens of an architect, but also through the lens of government, of making sound financial decisions, of being able to look at different options and prove out financially and from a community betterment perspective, what the best direction, if any, is moving forward for such a project. So I just want to lead with that because it's very important to me personally, and it's very important to our process and how we work to make sure that these are not just proposals that exist in a vacuum and are pie in the sky ideas, but are actionable, are supported with data, and are really informed by good financial analysis that not only tells the financial side of the story in terms of construction or capital cost, but shows you not the complete operating cost of the facility and the anticipated revenue. So you have a clear understanding of the cost recovery of the facility. A recreation and community center is perhaps one of the only public facilities that can be built with an eye towards cost recovery and revenue generation. And that's something that's very important and at the front of our minds as we go through this process. So to tell you a little bit more about our firm, we were established in 1974. Williams and I were established in the same year. So we've been in business for almost 50 years, a little over $3 billion in sports and recreation facility in our time together. We're a very, I would say, experienced and senior firm. Nearly all of our professionals are licensed architects and interior designers. So it just brings a very high degree of expertise to our firm and a high degree of confidence to the services we provide. We're very well versed in sustainable and net zero design. We like to say we incorporate a shade of green in everything we design. And as Stevie mentioned, we didn't just put this project team of Williams, Pros Consulting, and Hitchcock Design Group together in an effort to try to win this project. This is a team that's had a demonstrated record of success for the last 2 decades on a number of community center feasibility study projects all throughout the country. And these are just a list of a few of them. The closest one here is in Carroll Stream, but as you can see from this and the next slide, we have done this all over the country. Next, please. Okay, moving on. We like to say that our community center feasibility process really is built upon 5 pillars of success, and those are public engagement, partnership and collaboration opportunities, business and operations planning, our creativity in design and planning, and our experience in doing all this. And I wanted to talk just very briefly about each one of those pillars. What's so important to our process and something that I truly enjoy as part of this, and it's a process I'll be leading as part of the project, if we could move forward to the next one, is our public engagement process. We like to go far beyond the traditional open house kind of canned architect speech meeting with some boards and some feedback, and really try to meet people where they are in the community. We want to dare to be different. We want to experiment with different ways to reach people in Brookfield, let them know about the project, truly and intentionally get their feedback on any concerns they may have so that those can be addressed and the community knows that we've listened. So we want to give options. We want to be hands-on in the planning process. We want to make it clear. We want to make it fun, inspiring. We want everybody associated with it to come across as being trustworthy and providing good information. And we want to go beyond the easel and the PowerPoint, like I said, and meet people where they are. We provided the interview committee with a number of different demonstrations of some different engagement tools we use online, and that got to be fun. We talked about 3 words that describe Brookfield, and they all showed up on the screen using a process called, or a software app called Menti. And we can leverage things like that to really engage people in different forums. It's also really important for us to look at different partnerships, not only to operate and program the facility, but to potentially look for capital to build it. So these are just several examples of different organizations, different governmental entities, and different businesses that we might look to partner with. And more community centers we're finding these days aren't just gone alone by a municipality or a park district. There are meaningful partnerships used to construct and operate the facility with a number of different community entities. Another really interesting convergence we see is that between what's happening with libraries and what's happening with what we traditionally think of as community centers in terms of bringing people together. So you have a beautiful new library, but that, among others, are potential partnerships we want to make sure we're addressing. We want to make sure that beyond this public engagement and identifying partnerships process, we really are building a solid case for the need for a facility before a single line is drawn or a single idea is generated. Our team conducts a statistically valid survey, both with mail and online responses, to make sure that we're getting a good cross-section of responses regarding what should be in the center and what concerns people may have. We want to do a nice, robust round of data analysis to make sure we are really understanding the village's history, culture, demographics, really make sure that we're being thorough in data collection and actively listening to what is important for this community rather than just telling you what's worked for your neighbors. We want to thoroughly analyze the market and competition. It's very important to know what's around you, and because this is revenue generating, who it may be competing with, what they're offering, what their price points are. That directly informs how this will need to be successful and what sort of pricing and revenue constraints may exist. And then we have to answer some important questions, such as what is needed, where, and why? What's the vision? What are the priorities? What's the right size for this facility? How can we achieve it? Mostly not only through process, but funding. So we also want to make sure we're an active partner in helping you seek the various grants that are out there for public facilities. Our firm has a really enviable track record of procuring all sorts of grants for our recreation clients to help build facilities. And then most important, at least in terms of a community approach, what is the legacy? How does this make the community better? How does this improve quality of life for everybody here in Brookfield? Then all of that information, that programming, that data analysis starts to inform design directions. And what do we do? And we ask ourselves, what makes a great destination facility? It generates income. It contributes to the local economy. It gives you a demonstrable return on investment. It manages partnerships. And everything is aligned, most importantly, to financial sustainability in the overall plan. So those considerations are at the forefront of anything we do before a single line is drawn or an idea is explored. It's very important to us, as Stevie mentioned, that the facilities that we work on in this process aims for providing a facility that is not only for a diverse community, but for a multi-generational community. So just a few bullet points there on how we do that. How can we really and truly design a facility that brings people together from different cultures, across different backgrounds and ethnicities, and across different generations? It's something we really ask ourselves. We think about the types of programming and activities that can bring people together, and it becomes part of the overall plan. And we want to analyze different directions. It should not be a foregone conclusion at all that there is definitely only one way to do this. We want to look at the potential for a potential build out or remodeling of space the village might lease. We might look at an addition or remodeling to an existing facility that the village owns or may own. We may look at an adaptive reuse or remodeling of a building that would be purchased for conversion to this facility. And then, of course, there is the option of the completely new facility. I think wherever way this goes, it's very important to us to make sure we give every single possibility an equal amount of time and an equal amount of effort. So you as village trustees can answer those questions about why this direction, why this price tag. We want to make sure we're giving as much information as we can and completely supporting a direction that's in the best interest of everybody in this room and in this village. And as Stevie mentioned, and I've been talking about in my few minutes up here, it's incredibly important not only to have a good design and planning outcome, but to really be able to prove it through a detailed financial plan and an operational strategy, which is a process and a document that we call a pro forma. So we want, in addition to the capital costs, we want to take a look at all of the revenue generating aspects of the facility, all of the expenditures associated with the facility, and look at how much cost this facility is able to recover. We call that cost recovery, basically taking the costs divided, the cost divided by the revenues. And normally we are doing rec centers that are in the 80 to 90% cost recovery model. That is really crucial information for us to understand. And as we look at the different options, as we see these, it often affects the design approach. We may see that cost recovery isn't looking really good here. What's driving that? Maybe the size of the facility needs to come down. Maybe the program has to change. I promise that's not me. And as I mentioned, it's important for us to, for everybody in the room to help, wherever this goes, to help create a lasting legacy for the village of Brookfield, to have a space where the community can come together, celebrate mind, body, and spirit among generations and among cultures. So with that, I've said too much. I'd love to open it up for questions and comments.
Comments, questions, concerns from the board?
I have a couple. I mean, having come from District 95 School Board, I mean, I've seen the growth that this community has seen from young families, and I consider this the greatest deficiency we have in our offerings is our current Parks and Rec being run out of the lower level of Village Hall. It's frankly, it's an embarrassment. So I'm really excited about this, and I'm excited about what this can bring to the community. Question on the timeline that I saw that was presented to the board, it said like an April launch date, had a timeline through the end of 2022, and I'm assuming we're well beyond that.
I'm sure that that was based on an early schedule. We'll probably be shifting that forward. So I would imagine that this we'll do our best to keep things moving. But one of the things we find is that we don't always know exactly how this will wrap up until we get a real sense of the kind of community engagement and the commentary and discussion that comes back. But having said all that, I would say at this point, getting started now rather than in April, we'd be looking to shift that forward and conclude the study in spring of next year.
Okay. And how do you design something, given just the range of potential offerings and then not knowing what the potential funding would be or sources would be as far as what the community is open to, how do you narrow that down and tweak that with such a wide range of?
Well, that's a really good question, and I wish I had a really simple answer to it. But I would say this is probably the most succinct way I can explain it, is that community needs and potential drive a program, which is what's in a facility. that program has to be analyzed against revenue generating potential. And that doesn't mean that just you do or don't do something just because it generates revenue, but there does need to be a revenue generating component to the plan. And that mix of revenue generating space and other spaces that are there for the benefit of the community really drive the design. So what's in it is a direct result of the needs that we discover from the community engagement process and our data analysis process. The design itself is another layer that we really want to get into once we know all those answers and we understand the community, we understand what's special and near and dear to you in terms of the appearance of the facility and the style and the character of the facility. But it all starts with the right program that is informed by the right information regarding what the community wants.
And then just one last comment, I really like the multi-generational aspect. I know when we were doing the demographic study prior to the District 95 expansion, what they found was that the largest demographic larger than 65 and older was 12 and under. Mm-hmm. Obviously that's changed somewhat, but still shows kind of a dichotomy of where we're at. And
yeah, there's been a lot of change in demographics and the community makeup here, as well as a lot of the surrounding communities. And one other thing I'd mention as part of this is that we don't want to just design and plan for this snapshot in time. We do try to layer an aspect of flexibility into these facilities. For example, pickleball is all the rage right now in active adult recreation program. We have no idea if that's going to be the case 5 years from now, 20 years from now. But the spaces that we do that in now, while it's still really popular, better be able to handle multiple and I would say growing and emerging needs as we move forward.
thank you.
I appreciated sitting in on the interviews, your firm's focus on the community engagement, because I know that without a lot of support from the community, this isn't something that would necessarily go forward. And so all of that community engagement that Williams is proposing to do throughout this process, I think can build a consensus and build the support for a project if we decide to go forward with it. So I really appreciated that.
Thanks.
I agree with Trustee Conroy. The biggest deficit that we have right now is a lack of a community center of this kind of nature. And I'm totally in favor of moving forward with this.
Other comments? So this would require board approval for the contract. We do not have our first meeting in August, so this would be the fourth Monday of August, be on our agenda.
Correct.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
very much.
Look forward to working together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to discussion concerning the village's adoption of the Memorandum of Understanding between West Suburban Municipalities and Cross-Community Climate Collaboration. I believe Trustee Klusny is going to take the lead on this.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to give a little background to how this came about and then ask a couple of folks, our staff liaison for Conservation Commission and Commissioner Iris Stroop to come forward and mention a couple of additional items as well before I open it up to the board comment. Starting in about 2019, the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus started on a really big engagement process regarding a climate action plan for the region. The region making up over 245 communities, engaging a number of people through a process to develop a plan. This process completed in 2021 and was adopted in July of 2021 by the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus and the Environment Committee of that caucus. Through that process, there's been a number of events and programs that have been presented about how to move forward with the items in that climate action plan that each municipality could take. One thing that our Conservation Commission in Brookfield has started on is a sustainability plan for the village that the board could adopt in the future. But it is a lot of work. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of time for volunteers. And a lot of other communities were recognizing that as well. 3 mayors of Broadview, River Forest, and Oak Park came together after attending Greentown in Rockford last year to look at how to make it a little more achievable locally to attack climate action on a more regional scale. And so they came up with this program, the Cross Community Climate Collaboration, or C4, as a way to address a smaller group of communities within the 245 region to look at climate action plan across communities and how to share resources, how to share ideas, and look at finances and potential projects they could work on together. And so this group was formed to help bring those ideas together. It's in the board packet, I know, but just to reiterate, it's designed to bring together BIPOC and non-minority communities across income lines to share ideas, secure resources, and drive large-scale projects within and across communities that achieve agreed-upon greenhouse gas emissions reductions, equity, and sustainability goals. And aligned with 3 fundamental imperatives: resiliency, equity, and climate protection. Some of the things that the group is proposing to assist all of the communities in the region with are developing recommendations and roadmaps to achieve those items, which is something that I think locally is difficult to do on your own and in a silo. And so it's a pretty interesting initiative. There's a non-binding MOU that can be renewed from year to year, mutual written agreement with some services. And there's 2 consultants that are helping with it, Gary Canine from Senva Generations Ahead, and Daryl Johnson from Urban Efficiency Group are leading the effort and working with the 3 mayors of Broadview, River Forest, and Oak Park to lead that effort. They did have an initial signing ceremony late in June, and 14 municipalities have signed on to work on this already. And that's why it is on our agenda today to discuss whether it is something that the Village of Brookfield would like to sign on and join as well. I'd like to invite Commissioner Stroop forward to share some additional items from our commission's discussion about this. And then I'd like to ask Victor to come up too.
Hi, pardon my phone, my printer's not working. But my name's Iris Overstreet Stroop. I'm on the Conservation Commission, as Ms. Kaluzny said, and we are clearly in favor of signing on to the C4, and there are a lot of advantages, not just to the Conservation Commission, but to the village as a whole. The C4 would be a core resource for our village sustainability plan. It ensures the success of the village's endorsement of the Climate Action Plan for Greater Chicago Region by the Mayor's Caucus, which we have already committed ourselves to. It would cover highly specialized skill sets required for greenhouse gas emission inventorying, which is something at a small village level would be very difficult to achieve. It would standardize greenhouse gas emission reporting for municipalities for comparable and effective goal setting. And it also will lower the costs for services necessary for mitigating greenhouse gas emissions, like renewable energy procurement, composting, and electronic vehicle infrastructure. It also enhances our competitiveness in grant applications. So these are just a few of the ways that joining C4 would help not just the Conservation Commission, but the village as a whole. We would like to commend the board for the steps that you have already taken, and we feel like this is the direction that we need to head in. Thank you.
Thank you. Victor.
Hello, everyone. Victor Janis, I'm the staff liaison for the conservation. I'm just going to support conservation in this because I've been in the monthly meetings that we go to, and it's a great avenue for them to be able to get the additional resources because there are so many different things that are required. Not everybody's an expert in it all. So the more heads we get together, the more achievable we're going to be able to get. So that's just my end. Okay?
Thank you, Victor.
Thank you.
Comments, questions from the board?
Is there a cost to joining in this? Because I see that there are the consultants that are associated.
There's not. They have received grant funding to do this initiative. There could be costs that we could choose to be partake in the future, but those would come before the board as those projects were, came forward as grant opportunities.
Excellent. My other question is about staffing. I see that we're supposed to sign on for monthly meetings with this group. Do we have someone on staff do we have the ability to give this time for this?
We'll find it. Figure it out.
Okay.
Is there formal action, Tim, required on this, or is it just a direction, or how does it?
Right, but I think we're just looking for direction. Trustee Kaluzny was in favor of bringing this before the board. If the board is supportive of this, I think the next step would be your next agenda, have the formal MOU on the agenda for a resolution or a form of approval.
So there is a vote that comes forward on it, per se, that way, correct?
You have to approve the MOU, the memorandum of understanding.
I'm all in favor of this. I think to not be in favor would be incredibly tone deaf, as the planet just seems like it's on fire right now, and the UK just recorded its highest temperature ever in recorded history. Any action taken is, at this point, not enough, and so anything we can do needs to be done, and I think we're behind the curve and need to catch up and to take action as it's part of a larger consortium makes it easier for everybody. So steps that we can be taking, and if the neighboring towns and communities are also taking the same steps, it's easier for all of us to do that. So I'm in full support.
I agree.
I'll say too, it's also being run out of WCMC, so I believe it'll be part of those meetings, a piece of those meetings moving forward, and I think the funding that comes in and out through grants that might come into the state will be, Commissioner Aguilar's saying yes. He was at the meeting with me. So that's the funding body of how then funds would get distributed from the state or other things that might come in to support these initiatives is through WCMC.
A lot of federal opportunities as well.
Okay, great. So that fourth
Yep.
Monday, we'll have that on the agenda. Next item on the agenda is consideration of the creation of a decibel-specific noise ordinance.
Chief of Police is one.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening. Thank you for thank you for allowing me to just present to you all for a little bit here. As you can see from my committee item memo, this is a discussion that I'd like to have regarding the consideration of a decibel-specific noise ordinance. As we all know, as a result of the coronavirus pandemic, there has been an increased utilization of outdoor dining space. Many businesses have actually created permanent spaces to accommodate the comfortability of patrons as they come to their businesses. And in kind of that evolution, we've seen an increased offering of outdoor music in the form of live music, recorded music, but it's a continuing growth. Thank you. Now, although it is something that's been enjoyed largely by its patrons, by the business patrons, it's also, this increased form of entertainment has also brought for some, an unwelcome disruption, especially to the nearby residents. As we know, Brookfield is, with the businesses that we have here, is heavily, they are heavily immersed in the residential. So the village does have ordinances in place to regulate some forms of noise, but our current regulations do not provide the specificity or the comprehensive language necessary to address all the sources of noise, particularly when it's produced at excessively loud or disruptive levels. In our code, it actually does not cover noise created by machines or other devices for the producing or reproducing of sound in such a manner as to disturb the peace. For the police department, we've been able to regulate excessive noise in the form of having a complainant report that that noise that was produced was disturbing to his or her peace. Now, we do that through the form of the disorderly conduct statute through the local ordinances that we have. Now, an important caveat to this is that if a complainant makes that complaint, now let me back up one step. Generally speaking, the police department will attempt to find compliance through by speaking with a business, by speaking with whoever is creating that noise and issuing a warning. But if that does not net compliance, then the next step is requesting that complainant to sign ultimately a citation for disorderly conduct, because that is the only vehicle that we have at that point to have any kind of enforcement action. By statute, a police officer, cannot have their peace disturbed. So therefore, we can't sign that citation against the individual or the business. So if this is something that the board would like us to pursue, it's important to consider that there needs to be specificity if we were to create a noise ordinance that can be regulated by the police department. Vague and overly interpretive statute language brings with it First Amendment constitutional concerns of free speech. So if we want to consider doing this, it's important to consider a few parameters. The specific devices or noise emitting sources that would be addressed. So there would need to be language such as a machine or device for the producing or reproducing of sound in such manner as to disturb the peace, but also ensuring the continuing permissibility of equipment and sources already covered in other ordinances that we've previously discussed. I would also suggest that we consider designating specific hours and days for restrictions to be placed. Something similar to what we have for Brookfield's outdoor cafe ordinance with day and time restrictions. And lastly, and that's kind of the main part of this discussion, would be to consider setting decibel thresholds to establish objective limits for noise. As we can see here, there's this chart that is also in your memo, and what we did was we looked at we looked at comparative communities to compare that have already established decibel thresholds for the production of noise. Now, these are very, very, very different communities, and so even as you can see, some of their zoning levels we don't have. So ultimately, what we're looking for is your initial feedback and thoughts as we are willing. This is just the beginning of our research, and to be able to even speak further with the village attorney to find the specific parameters that need to be covered. Whether it is, as we talk about, there will need to be exceptions, things that are industrial that make noise, that those are the thresholds that have to be considered. There are events and other things that we do, even as a village, that would need to be considered in a statute. And many of the other communities that are listed here go into those specific parameters to ensure that those things are regulated. And another thing, and sorry to being a little bit, as far as Brookfield's numbers go, I know we established just a general table to look at. Please understand that we have yet, at this time, we need to go out. What I would suggest and what I'd like to do is for us to go out and measure noise levels within our community. We have our industrial already situated very close to residential. So I would like for us to have an opportunity to measure those levels, because whatever they're generating already, that's going to need to continue to be permitted if we were to consider moving forward with this. Because those places, as well as our other businesses, restaurants, bars, we have a different dynamic than, let's say, Naperville or Elmhurst. I think we need to really consider those things if we are to move forward in something like this. So ultimately, if approved, we would like to, this would be something that we would be able to enforce objectively through thresholds and through the usage of tools like a decibel reader. Any questions or thoughts?
Desire of the board to pursue this?
How do you read it? So you have a decibel reader, so you stand at the perimeter of the property and measure it, or you set it up next to the amp, or where do you take your measurement from? Or whatever
Yeah.
the source of noise is.
Right. Based on these different ordinances, we would have to establish a distance that you would take that measurement from, because you're ultimately measuring, because to your point, if you have a business or a restaurant that's having outdoor music, and then you're not doing it necessarily at their property line. Typically, a lot of these ordinances would specify 50 to 100 feet away from that. Or if it was a specific complaint from a residence, then the officer or code enforcement theoretically would be able to take that measurement from that location of where they're making the complaint.
Okay, so typically, at least these decibel levels, those would be settings within X amount of feet of the property line of the
Correct.
source.
Correct.
Okay.
Those are pretty strict, actually. 45 is lower than a conversation. Every 3 decibels, you're basically doubling the sound. So 60 to 65, that's a huge difference in actual sound levels. But like that one that says 45, they must only be allowed to whisper. That one blows my mind, but I'm in favor. I think there's a need for it. I really would rather elaborate on the statement of you saying that the peace officer's peace can never be disturbed. I so disagree with that. I know law is different, but you're still human, and so I don't like that one. But it's true. I know the law, but I hate that one because that's what leads to all the other problems that we have. I am in favor of this. I could not find in there, are we going to be covering also vehicles, decibel sound, vehicle speakers? Because I was once that 18-year-old with speakers that would annoy my neighbors and shake my mirror. I couldn't see anything when I was driving down. I was that kid. So I realized that my mirror fell off my car. It was so bad. But there probably should be addressed into that same scenario. And then, concerts in the park, how do we work with that? What if we ever wanted to bring back carnivals or something to that effect? How do you address that? I understand, I saw it in there that parades are different, whether it be a civic parade or military parade or something to that effect, that would be already covered. I would assume that if we had something else, that would have to be built into a permit process to be able to exceed those kind of decibel levels. But I'm totally in favor of going down this route and trying to figure out what we can discover. I am not in favor of 45 because I think that's below a whisper. But
So a few things. My encouragement also would be to consider higher thresholds, even in just the proposal that just for discussion's sake, I took the highest thresholds of the comparative communities that we looked at for initial. To your point about vehicles, those sound levels are addressed through the Illinois Vehicle Code, and ultimately, if residents or anyone were to make a complaint based on the loudness of music or loud exhaust or something to that effect, that's when an officer is permitted to effect a traffic stop actually based on that alone and investigate further to potentially issue a citation. And I appreciate your understanding for
the breach of the breach of peace. That leads to all the other issues, and it's a whole different conversation.
If I could just say to what the chief said, thank God this ordinance wasn't in place when Ed Cote was a 16-year-old, but these ordinances and any ordinance like this is really only there for when we need it, for when there's a complaint. We're not going to be out there mining the town with a noise meter, and every time we hear something above 50 decibels, writing a ticket. It's complaint driven. And right now the problem is with the code, I think it uses the word excessive noise. That's a nuisance. Well, there's no standard as to.
It's too broad.
Yeah, there's nothing enforceable, so we don't enforce anything. You have an ordinance like this. Now there's a complaint. We would exempt our own events, public events. We'd exempt them, carnivals and concerts on Grand Avenue and so forth, because they're by nature that are community events, and they'd be exempted from the ordinance. The rest of it, it's there for when you need it. You don't use it every day. You only use it in extreme cases. Our police are very good and very sensitive in knowing when to apply a violation and when not to. But what it does, it gives you an objective standard to use when you need it. Not when Ed Cote's playing his music, every once in a while, a little bit too loud. That would not, we would not.
Mine was over 118 decibels. I had no business being in my neighborhood.
I think that even the
Sounds
most
like a
generous ordinance of those would
Yes.
affect a ticket in that situation. But one of the sample, communities that we're using for research, speaking of exemptions, just high level, emergency operations, noises required by law, lawn maintenance and snow removal, community events, emergency notification, aircraft, trains, and church bells. So,
Chief, when would you anticipate coming back to us with something to discuss more?
I'd certainly ideally love to come back to you by the end of August with our next meeting, but, and I appreciate the ask as far as one of the things that I'd like to make sure that we do is have an opportunity to monitor the various businesses that, especially those that are engaging in outdoor, music and different types of entertainment. So I hope that in the next month, we should have an opportunity to sample all of that and to be able to get some more objective, evidence through measurements.
I think talking to some of the businesses about that level too, I don't think anyone's walking around 100 feet from their own business checking decibel levels. And so understanding, what that volume level is and if there's a warning structure or something in place, because I agree, I don't think, you're there running an event, you don't know what it sounds like a block away.
And again, that has always been our, the way that we operate. It's even in what we have now, it's always initially trying to get compliance because we are trying to work together and all live together, peacefully.
Do you already have the tools to measure it?
So, no,
You do
we
not?
would have to purchase that as well.
To that point, though, is a good point, that we have not tested 45, 50, 55, 60. We wanted to see if the board wanted to do anything. I know years ago, you did adopt some kind of noise ordinance, and for whatever reason, that ordinance was repealed. So we weren't sure if the board was gonna be in favor of this. If you are, these are you can, not do it with an iPhone. They're very inexpensive, but we would get a decibel meter.
Right.
So the next time we come to you with an ordinance, if that's the direction of the board, we will, the numbers that we put on here for Brookfield will be reflective of Brookfield noise, of what's considered reasonable in Brookfield.
Are these not common in our surrounding communities? I noticed you went out pretty far into DuPage County to find examples here. Do they have this around us at all, or?
What I've found in most of our neighboring communities are overly vague interpretive ordinances that are not typically used for citing, because it does run into, when it is interpretive, you could potentially run into First Amendment issues. So yeah, they are operating more or less the way we do as far as trying to obtain compliance, and then if not, the burden falls on the complainant. They have to name themselves and sign against the other resident or business owner, and then they ultimately would go to, typically local court, and then go before an adjudicator to plead their case and go that route.
I think it might make sense to consider measuring at a neighboring property line. That might be a good spot as a beginning. But I think it would also be good to consider construction and mowing, whether or not we put that in the code, just to consider it, because I know that can be a source of nuisance noise, especially during certain hours. So maybe just putting an hour limit on that. I think that the code right now only addresses road construction and not, for example, if I was putting an addition on my house and not wanting to bother my neighbors. But I think this is a great beginning.
Okay,
Okay.
great,
Thank
thank
you.
you. That completes the items on our agenda. Would once again like to open up the meeting to public comment. Anyone on my right side?
That means I can't ride my Harley Davidson. No.
Anyone on my left side? Seeing no further comment, ask for a motion to adjourn the committee of the whole meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by trustee Conroy, second by trustee Leclerc. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Conroy?
Aye.
Trustee Leclerc?